September 18th, 2025 meeting of the Seattle Design Commission. Our meetings are recorded on MS Teams for posting on our website. From 10 until noon today, we're getting a update by the city Sound Transit team and the work that they've been doing related to Sound Transit 3 project. We'll go ahead and we'll do a round of introductions in the room. We do have Kate Clark also attending virtually, and we'll make sure to loop her into any of the question and conversation. Is there anyone from the public that you know that might be attending today?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Because as part of the opportunity, part of the structure, there's a presentation and an opportunity for public comment. So we want to make sure that we have an opportunity like that. Ray, do you want to kick us off with the introduction?
I'm Ray Gaskell, and I'm the Commissioner for Planning. Good to see you all.
Morning, everyone. My name is Eric Alethio, and I'm the Get Engaged member this year.
Zubin Rab, Architecture Commissioner.
Phoebe Boger, Landscape Architect Commissioner.
Good morning. I'm Kevin O'Neill, the Transportation Planning Commissioner and Chair. I want to disclose that I previously worked for the Seattle Department of Transportation and was in a management role on this project a number of years.
Good morning, I'm Sherry Missy, the At-Large Commissioner.
I'm Brian Markham, Engineering Commissioner.
Kate.
Hi, Kate Clark, Art Commissioner.
Kate. Do you want to start with introductions? We'll start with Eric.
Hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be here. As Sarah mentioned, I started a few months ago, exactly April 23rd. Best day of my life this year. So I joined the CD September program and the equity advisor to support every staff member of the team to ensure that they can apply equity tool in their work.
Thank you. And yeah, super happy to have you here today, Eric. I'm Sarah Maxana. I'm the Sound Transit Program Director at the Office of Waterfront Civic Projects and Sound Transit. Good to be here.
Hi, folks. Justin Clark. I'm on the Sound Transit team as the West Seattle and Ballard Link Extension's third-party agreements lead.
And good morning, I'm Jason Hampton. It's good to be back. I've been leading the project development for the West Seattle Link Extension since really 2020.
Juliet, are you joining us as a member of the public today?
I am indeed. I am also on the design for Sound Transit's West Seattle Link Extension project, but I am just listening in as a member of the public in my role today.
Thanks. Nice to see you, Juliet. I think that's it for introduction. So Sarah, I'll just give you a floor.
Do you have the slides or am I presenting?
I can present.
Well, no, I can. I should have.
I have the deck you sent yesterday.
Yeah, I can join the meeting. I should have been doing that while I was.
That's the same deck from yesterday.
It is the same deck, and I put it in Teams for you this morning. Go. Sharing. Let's see if I can minimize this a little bit more. Without a mouse, I am useless. All right. Okay, so good to be here for our quarterly update. For these quarterly updates, especially this year, while we haven't had any formal reviews of the projects, it's really just an opportunity for us to give you an update on all of the other work that the staff team is doing to prepare for the next phases of the project and the work coming up, which of course is going to include a number of formal reviews for both West Seattle and Ballard Extension in 2026. And so we've got some slides that follow up on items that we talked about at our June quarterly update, and hopefully set the stage for our what will be, I think, a December update, which will include the look ahead for 2026, really getting ready for those. Advancing. Sometimes we have a lot. Oh, okay. I'm about to flip through 5 slides, probably for the hitting that I just did. Okay. So I've got, I'm going to blow through, you know, who the ST3 city team is. We have had a huge year at City Council. We have spent so much time with so many different committees at City Council. So I'll touch on where all of that is at. I think when we were here the first week of June, we were had not yet passed any of that legislation, but now we are on the cusp of passing our third body of legislation. We'll touch on some of the major activities that we highlighted earlier in the year, add a couple additional ones, and then have space for discussion and future briefings. Of course, this is just the boilerplate slide, ST3 in Seattle, a lot of projects going on, and our ST3 city team is supporting this, the largest infrastructure project program in the city's history. Our ST3 city team is a One Seattle effort that partners with Sound Transit to support the delivery of these projects to Seattle communities. While we are led by the Office of the Waterfront Civic Projects and Sound Transit, we rely on subject matter expertise and leadership from about 20 different city departments. And so we are really the umbrella that helps channel that work. So I want to start off by giving you some updates on our city legislative agenda. We are probably looking at every single year we are going to be in front of City Council, bringing pieces of this project that require City Council action of these projects, bringing that in front of Council. This year was focused on really laying out some of the parameters for all of that future work. So the big body right at the beginning of the year was the land use code amendments for light rail transit facilities. We were, of course, in front of you several times last year and earlier this year talking about those code amendments. And then the adoption of the West Seattle Link Extension project. We are underway right now in front of Council on the staff and resource plan. I'll touch on each of those in a moment. But next year, we are expecting a similar action, adoption of the infill station at Graham Street, adoption of the Ballard Link Extension project, likely in 2027, and then various agreements related to real property or right-of-way transfers. So starting with the land use code amendments, when we were in front of you in June, we were still in the throes of the council process. The council adopted those code amendment changes in June, on June 10th, and that really lays out the code environment for light rail transit facilities in the city. Of course, prior to that, the land use code managed everything on a parcel by parcel basis and really wasn't conducive to a linear transportation system. Our new code creates one set of requirements and development standards for that linear transportation system, regardless of the surrounding code or surrounding zoning that it's in. We also put in place several process-related improvements, streamlining the master use permit process, particularly the appeal process, creating a project-level preliminary construction management plan that's expected to happen at around 30% submittal, creating a project-level tree and vegetation management plan, which is really going to let us get ahead and start hopefully replacing trees, maybe even before they come down in the construction area. And then design-related improvements, including establishing those development standards, that single set of standards for light rail transit facilities, regardless of the surrounding zone, revising bike parking requirements, and then, of course, identifying this body as an advisory review body in that permit process. So those are the land use codes. That was 5 years of work. It felt really great to get that done and signed. And then the following week, we were in front of council again on the formal adoption of the West Seattle Link Extension project. This is a necessary step in the four steps at different levels of government that are necessary before the city can issue permits, starting with the Sound Transit Board, adopting the project, the FTA, publishing the record of decision, and then the city has to take action both by ordinance and resolution to adopt the project into the Transitway Agreement and to adopt the alignment by resolution. So that was adopted in July 15th for the West Seattle Link Extension Project. And those steps are all necessary before the city can issue permits.
Can I just,
Yeah, please.
I think I understand this, so I don't want to belabor it, but when you say a project level tree and vegetation management plan,
Yeah.
that means WSLE or BLE project.
Yes.
It's the scale of
Yep.
time.
Yep.
Thanks.
Yeah, and that was very much to avoid what otherwise would have happened in our code, which is a parcel by parcel or permit by permit approach. And this really allows a more holistic look at what the tree and vegetation management loss is going to be and how we can best manage it and move, allow us to have flexibility in where new trees are put in, for example. And then, so that was adopted in July, and now we are back in front of council right now. Had a committee vote yesterday and are expecting a full council vote on Tuesday next week to put in place the position authority and budget authority for us to expand our team. We've long known that the permit volume that we are expecting for West Seattle Link Extension is greatly surpasses what the entirety of our permit staff could absorb. And so we've been preparing for the last year for the additional staffing capacity that we are going to need. This is all just, the bullets are just kind of the technical details of what the budget amendment legislation itself did. But that second bullet is key, that this gives us position authority, which does not necessarily mean that we go out and start hiring all of them, but gives us the positions for 50 full-time positions across 6 departments, primarily SDOT and the utilities, but also Parks and Recreation, SDCI, Department of Neighborhoods. SDCI is listed only as one position of note. They already had position authority for a number of positions that had been abrogated. So they had the vacancies, and so they're going to be able to use those. So that we do expect that SDCI is going to have to staff up for this volume as well. A key piece of this is that we will not be moving forward with recruitment of this work until there is more certainty for the project itself moving forward, West Seattle moving forward, and having partnership or permit funding agreements in place with Sound Transit. So we're expecting about 80% of these positions will have some match funding from Sound Transit. So we're negotiating that right now, but we are expecting the council vote next week, right before council gets into their budget process. So that's the council activities since we last met. Touching on our major activities, this is similar to the list that we talked about in June, but with a couple additions. Want to talk a little bit about preparation for the Ballard Link Extension Draft EIS, which we had thought was going to be released by now, but has been pushed out a little bit, which gives us more time to get ready for it. Talk a little bit about the Racial Equity Toolkit update that will be happening in tandem with that draft EIS publication. We'll touch on some of our planning efforts, both specific to the project with the non-motorized access fund or access allowance and station area planning, but also touch on some of the other planning efforts that OPCD is leading adjacent to the S23 station areas. And then touch briefly on the anticipated West Seattle Link Extension permit submittal timeline, and then wrap up a little bit just on one slide on Sound Transit's enterprise initiative that the city is very much engaged in and looking to partner on. But of course, with Sound Transit here, they will provide far more information on that than we will in our presentation. So this slide is an abbreviation of what we talked about last time, that the Ballard DEIS, we're expecting sometime this fall, I think right now in maybe the mid to late November time frame. This is, of course, the second DEIS for Ballard Link Extension. The January 2022 DEIS for West Seattle and Ballard was the initial DEIS. The second one came about because there were so many additional stations, because the projects were bifurcated, but there were so many additional stations that were added during that further studies period after the DEIS. And our focus is going to be on those new station areas. So the preferred alternative includes 5 station alternatives that were not a part of the 2022 DEIS. So that's where we're going to be focusing a lot of our attention. The China International District at Dearborn, the Midtown at James, the Denny shifted north station, the Seattle Center at Republican Shifted West, and the Interbay Station at Dravis. In addition, there are several lower cost alternatives that are being considered in some of these station areas. And given the enterprise initiative and the affordability issues that the capital program is facing at Sound Transit, we know there's going to be a lot of attention on those lower cost alternatives. And some of them are alternatives that we had expressed concerns about in our initial comments. And so we are probably going to be paying a little bit of focused attention to those as well. That includes the Fifth Avenue shallow diagonal alternative for the Chinatown International District Station, the Denny Westlake Shifted West, which is the consolidation with South Lake Union, the Ballard at 14th Ave Northwest, and the minimal operable segment, which is a termination at Smith Cove. Just to put a fine point on this one in particular, because the enterprise initiative that is progressing with at the Sound Transit Board level, they are starting to discuss cost-saving strategies for the capital program by project. And earlier this week, we saw a memo that had gone out to board members that included updated cost estimates and by project, and included some cost-saving strategies that could help address the affordability gap for the projects. And for Ballard Link Extension, this is one of them that was in that information. The preferred alternative, which is shown on the top, is for the downtown tunnel alignment, includes 5 stations, including the Denny. In this picture, it's the DT1 Denny that's just south of Denny. And then I can't quite tell. Maybe that's the preferred alternative, Denny shifted north. And the South Lake Union at 7th and Harrison. However, there is also in the DEIS an alternative that would consolidate the Denny and South Lake Union stations into one station at Denny shifted west. We think that station, clearly would offer a lot of cost savings to the capital program. It would minimize some of the risk and some of the construction impacts that we know from our review of this alternative earlier in the process. However, it means a reduction in transit connectivity where that South Lake Union station would have been. And so we're going to be really interested when we see the DEIS on measuring the pros and cons, and in particular, looking at this station consolidation alternative and thinking about how can it work? What would we want to see if this moves forward in terms of ensuring that we have transit connectivity to either the Denny station or the Seattle Center station, thinking about the implications for the Mercer-Harrison corridor, or other connections that would have been met at that South Lake Union station. Whew, maybe I'm going to take a break from talking for a moment here.
Water to your right.
What you went over in the downtown one, are you including the potential for not building one of the new tunnels and using, is that the sort of the most radical cost saving proposals? Is that in this list or not? It's not there at this time.
That is not in this list right now in the box of looking at the DEIS. Our understanding is that is a very new idea that has been discussed at the board. We expect that through the enterprise initiative that there will be a moment in time, maybe sometime next year, that idea will have some analysis, and the city very much will want to be at the table to talk about it. We're not expecting that is in the DEIS. The DEIS only includes what the board adopted back in 2023 for study in the DEIS.
And I mean, it's fair to say that if that had legs, which I won't share my opinion on that, but that would drastically change the BLE.
Drastically change.
Right? That's a significant change.
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. I'll go through the slide and then let you embellish, Eric. We have been working on a joint agency racial equity toolkit with Sound Transit since 2018. There have been several updates to that racial equity toolkit at different points in the project, starting with alternatives analysis and some of the early works that was done before the initial draft DIS in January of 2022. There was an update with that draft DIS in 2022, another update with the FEIS for Seattle, and we're expecting that with the publication of the new Ballard DEIS, there will be another update to the racial equity toolkit that will be in tandem or offered at roughly the same time, providing an opportunity for community members to engage and comment on the advancing those racial equity toolkit identified outcomes through the EIS process. We have the opportunity as a partner with Sound Transit to review and comment on the racial equity toolkit update in advance of its publication, and we're doing that work with Sound Transit this fall. Our focus in particular for this one naturally is going to be the new station alternatives that were not in that previous draft, particularly CID is one of the red focus areas that have been identified for the project. So that new station at CID at Dearborn and the Midtown at James Station. We expect the RET will be published shortly after the DEIS. And then what's important is that while that is the piece that is moving forward for Ballard, we don't want lost that the RET is still an active and live and iterative process for West Seattle Link Extension. And so as we are progressing with station area planning, with our non-motorized access allowance projects, as our engagement with those communities, particularly Delridge, we are tracking RET outcomes and looking at ways to incorporate that as a lens in all of our work. I'm going to take a sip of water, Eric, if there's anything that you want to add.
Not so much, I mean, you presented it all, but I think just really appreciating the partnership that Sound Transit has offered. So it's been it is really great working with the Sound Transit team to co-lead the process of updating the ballot report. So so I've been coordinating with the several department staff, including staff members from the city who have worked in the joint agency report before and preparing for the review comments.
All right, continuing on, moving into our planning work group. I didn't give the overview slide at the beginning about all of our different work groups, but we have different topical work groups that are engaged in supporting the work and different, particularly in this pre-permitting phase. And this has been an area, this planning work group naturally has been an area of interest to the Design Commission, and a lot of the work that our planning work group is engaged in is really the foundation for the context briefings that we provide in advance of your formal reviews at PE 30%, 60%. There's 3 different major efforts that are supporting station access planning. The first is the non-motorized access allowance. That is our effort with Sound Transit for funds that have been identified by Sound Transit as part of ST3. We are doing design work earlier and projects completed by station opening. These are the access improvements near stations. The list for those access improvements originates with the Seattle Transportation Plan. So we've got our longer list of projects that have been identified for not just the station areas, but for the entire city. And we're taking that list and then trying to apply it into the non-motorized access allowance or a partnership or a match with Sound Transit to deliver on that. There are always going to be additional efforts or additional projects that the city is going to take on as part of perhaps projects that are funded through our levy. That would just be city-led projects, but the non-motorized access allowance is a key process with ST funded our ST3 funds. We also have station area planning, I'll have a little bit more on subsequent slides on each of these items. The station area planning efforts, of course, are that half-mile radius looking at land use, transportation, public realm, housing opportunities in the vicinity of station areas, ideally done in that 6 to 8 years in advance of station opening so that implementation can happen before service begins. And then a third area where we're doing a lot of work are the street concept plans. Of course, the West Seattle Street Concept Plan we brought to you back in 2023, and I think it was adopted in early 2024. These are city-led redesigns of streets, not all streets, but key streets where Streets Illustrated alone wouldn't apply or wouldn't quite match the context. And so a city-led process for streets adjacent to stations, partially implemented through Sound Transit construction, where the portion of the street might be within the station footprint, the construction footprint. For all of these 3 areas of planning, One thing that is key is that the city doesn't want to invest a whole lot of planning resources and put community through a planning process until we have certainty about where the station is going to be. And so there's this tension, this inherent tension between, wanting to be out there and understand the full content, tension that we feel and tension that has been discussed in our previous meetings and briefings with this body, is that there is a desire to do the station area planning and have that planning inform the design of the station, and not do the planning until we know where the station is going to be. And so as the Sound Transit Board right now is discussing major cost saving strategies for West Seattle that could include, as discussed at the board last week, an elimination of the Avalon station. We don't want to be out doing station area planning in that station if that station is not going to be part of the project. And so we are planning on some planning activities soon, but are kind of feeling this inherent, wanting to respond to changes that might be coming through the Sound Transit process. So just a little bit more information on each of these, the non-motorized access allowance projects. Eric Rundell from our team working with SDOT policy and planning on the identification of those projects with Sound Transit. For West Seattle Link Extension, they're in this, they've done an initial screening, they're in a prioritization step, scoring each of the 9 projects, and then completing conceptual design on all of them. Again, these projects start from that much longer list of projects that's in the STP. At the Graham Street Station, it's a little bit further back in the process. There's a screening step that's happening later this fall that is happening in tandem with community engagement related to the station area planning efforts. And over that little table is just showing the anticipated access allowance dollars that are available for each project. Station area planning. We talked, I think, back in March and June about our desire to be out in community, starting station area planning for West Seattle and Graham this summer. That has pushed into this fall as we are watching and waiting and learning from the process that's playing out at the Sound Transit Board. OPCD is leading this effort with SDOT in partnership and supporting roles, complementing community planning that has already happened in a number of these areas, particularly Graham Street. So Graham has had a tremendous amount of community visioning that has taken place over the last 20 years as they've waited and called on looked for the opportunity to have this infill station. The station area planning is wrapping up phase 1 of engagement with a block party a week from Saturday. So there's information there on the slide. Encourage anyone to attend. For West Seattle, there has been a launching of initial community-based organizations in a cohort group that are going to help shape the broader engagement effort. The West Seattle station area planning was intended to be for all of the stations in West Seattle as one large planning effort, touching on the 3 stations. We're waiting and seeing what's going to happen with the Avalon station. Of course, we don't want to be out ahead of a board decision on that. But we are hoping that we're going to be able to launch some broader engagement with West Seattle community members in October and November, and are reaching out to key boards and audiences right now. There'll be an updated website from OPCD soon.
For Graham Street, I heard there's going to be line dancing.
Line dance. I hear it's going to be a party,
Yeah.
so I think it's they have had a lot of fun events down there, and yes, cultural performances. Line dancing sounds fantastic.
Is Graham Street associated with West Seattle? Is that same design team, same, is it separate?
Separate project.
Yeah.
Are you going to lead the line?
Say it again?
Are you leading the line?
No, I'll be in the back.
At the June staff update, quarterly update here, there was a lot of interest in learning about some of the other planning efforts that are underway. And hopefully Katie Hema might be able to join us in a moment here and can better speak to these, but I wanted to at least
She joined by
she joined. Oh, Katie's online. Hey, Katie. I'll go through the slide, but certainly, or unless you want to take it now.
No,
Do you want to take
you go for it. I will be happy to answer questions.
All right, you are gonna back clean up. All right. I think I'm really interested in addition, so there's station area planning that we're going to do in the stations themselves, looking at that half-mile radius and thinking about how the land uses, transportation networks, everything interacts with that station. But there are also planning efforts that are happening adjacent to, I believe, every single ST3 station in the city. There is either a recent, current, or upcoming planning effort that is underway. OPCD is leading an updated planning effort for all of our regional centers. So that's the long-range plan for regional centers. That includes downtown, so all the downtown stations and CID, South Lake Union Uptown, so those stations, Seattle Center and South Lake Union and Denny, U District, Capitol Hill, First Hill, Northgate, those are ST2, but then a regional center at Ballard. There's also for those projects, that's actually my third bullet. I'll get to that in a moment. There's centers and corridors planning that happened as part of the update to the comprehensive plan. The comp plan that is in front of council right now identifies the Pinehurst station, which is that infill station as part of ST3 at 100 Northeast 130th Street. Identifies Pinehurst as a new center to promote future growth and the land use changes that came out of the station area planning that was done there a few years ago. And then last year, the industrial and maritime planning and the legislation that was adopted and put new zoning in place created an industrial urban innovation zone. And that zone applies to the station areas for West Seattle and Ballard that are in industrial areas. And so you've got the Soto Station, the Delridge Station on West Seattle Link Extension. You've got Smith Cove and Inner Bay, and even a part of the Ballard Station area that would have this new zone, which is intended to promote more of, preserve industrial spaces while also promoting more compatible employment growth near to those stations. Katie, what else would you like to add?
I think you nailed it. If commissioners have more specific questions, I can try to answer them the best I can. But
I used to work with
I have a question.
So should I just process?
Yeah.
Should we, so I think a lot of us are gonna have questions, so should we be asking as we go, or should we wait till?
It's a good question.
I think I only have one or two more slides.
Okay.
I'm almost
So
done.
do you mind holding, and then we'll just do a question, thank you.
Here's the scary slide. So this is our, this is an image that Sound Transit gave us that attempts to quantify visually the volume of permit activity that we are expecting for West Seattle Link Extension. So those line graphs, the lines at the bottom, each represent number of design packages associated with the 4 segments of West Seattle Link Extension. And the blue shaded area, the mountain behind, is an attempt to show the cumulative volume of permit activity. These are not individual permits. These are a number of design packages, and each design package could include anywhere from a handful to dozens of permits. And so, this graph alone does not fully capture the volume of activity that we are anticipating. The line in the middle at Q1 2027 marks where we anticipate Ballard Link Extension permitting could be expected to start. And so that will be in addition to the permit volume for West Seattle that'll still be underway. Of course, all of these design packages and schedule are subject to change. I'm going to wrap up with what I think will be a great segue to the next presenters with the Sound Transit Enterprise Initiative. This is just a slide that we pulled from their full board meeting in August. The Enterprise Initiative is Sound Transit's efforts to look across the agency, its capital program and service delivery, finance and administration, and recognize some of the cost challenges, affordability challenges that they're having in each of those areas, and identify the cost saving strategies, new revenue tools, and other efficiencies that can be gained to close that affordability gap. Notably, in August, they shared an up to $30 billion in year expenditures gap in their capital program for ST3 region-wide. And so there's a lot of work ahead for the board and for our board members to tackle that challenge. Just the lower bulleted list there provides a couple of the milestones or deliverables that are expected to come out of this effort. There's a framework later this fall for how they're going to be tackling this work, an updated ST3 system plan, a new regional transit long-range plan, and then an updated long-range financial plan. The city is very much a partner in this effort, and to Sound Transit. We want these projects to move forward. Our community members supported ST3 by over 70% of the vote. We want this transit. We want to help find the strategies necessary to keep the projects moving on the current timeframe, if at all possible. And then just to wrap up with upcoming SDC touch points, formal project reviews, we are expecting on the current schedule to pick up again in last time we were saying late 2025, but I think that's moved into 2026, which would include the 30% project reviews for the 4 segments for West Seattle Link Extension. For Ballard Link Extension, we would have the station context briefings and the pre-permitting or that PE project review for Ballard Link Extension, and then the South Graham Street PE pre-permitting project review. And then, of course, throughout that, we'd have our quarterly updates from the city team.
And we've been working with Ben to try to nail down a South Graham date. I think it's going to be the end of the year, which is great.
So, sorry, another, I guess, process question. So it's kind of under it. So we'll have questions and comments for the city team, you know, and hopefully we'll get to that in a minute, but does it make sense to do that now, or does it make sense to hear from Jason first and then integrate all that? We can do the latter, but then I want to make sure we're directing the question and comment to the right people. Well, it's just, I think it's a question for the group and present. It's what makes more sense.
So I think one thing, that's how long Jason's presentation is.
You're about 3 hours today.
3 hours? Well, that's fine.
Then we're definitely
Lots of questions after.
Is it additive or parallel?
It's parallel. I think it would probably be good to pause for questions now because we get into a little bit more technical detail, and I know you are going to have some different reactions to that than you would to what Sarah just presented.
That's kind of what I was thinking, so I appreciate that, so thank you. So why don't we shift to first questions and then comments for the Sarah and the city team based on, so clarifying question here. And Corinne, since you had a question, I'm just going to start with you.
Thanks. Thank you for sharing all of that, Sarah. I think we're all very excited and really want to be involved with all the planning efforts that you were talking about. And I know that there's a lot going on. I was wondering, when do you think we can kind of dive into that process? We know you're doing the sub-area planning studies effort, like that's also going on. When do you think you can come to us with more of in-depth planning efforts or options for that? Because we also want to make sure that we touch base on points that we can still have an input, give comments, and kind of review about that instead of having some like final options, which we know it's like well studied, but to also be able to review that as a group.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to defer to Katie in a moment, but I think what I do want to maybe ask a clarifying question. You know, our team, our ST3 team is focused on the station areas. And so our team is part, you know, Katie Hema and her station area planning team at OPCD is part of our broader city team. A lot of the planning efforts that I highlighted are a whole different set of teams at OPCD that aren't normally fully in it. You know, we keep tabs on each other and talk to each other, but it wouldn't be us that would be presenting that. And so we would really need to coordinate and ask at OPCD, and I could work with Michael if that is an ask, but it wouldn't be something that would come through our team because those are, you know, the regional centers update plan, for example, or the comprehensive plan is just a much, it wouldn't funnel through ST3 to bring that to you. So I guess I put that out as a, you know, maybe to Michael as a procedural thing, but also to Katie, you know, want to give you a chance to answer how best to bring station area planning. I know at our next quarterly update in December, we'll probably have a lot more meat to that we could bring at that quarterly update on station area planning, but I defer to your insight.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. So the two sort of big bodies of work were the stationary planning, where it's really sort of this team, my team leading the work versus sort of the other groups at OPCD who are doing the essentially other planning efforts that are in station areas. So they are related, we are coordinating, but they are actually being run by some other teams. So we are, committed to always making sure that we are providing you all with the information you need prior to reviewing, the designs of stations or other things related to specific stations. To Sarah's point, there's a lot of unknowns at the moment in terms of our timelines, and they're all sort of different. There's not one main timeline and there's a milestone where they're all hitting the same thing. So I think at the quarterly briefings, we're always happy to give you updates on what's going on and what we're hearing and where we're at in the process. I don't think I have a very good answer for you right now about the specific moment in time in which we'll be ready, because it depends on so many external milestones that are, out of our control a little bit. So that's my best bureaucratic non-answer. Hopefully we have more information for you next time.
I think, Katie, one of the things that we can talk about this. You're going through a process with South Korea and everyone's excited about what that looks like. Maybe when you get through your first round of engagement, that would be a logical point when we would want to, if there was any other project that we'd want to hear from you. What did you learn and how is that shaping the outcomes that you're trying to seek with this project? That might be a good test case to come to us with and say, how much of this are you going to standardize when you start rolling out more intensively some of the other work? What were the things that you did here? How much of that is the baseline that you draw from for all your other work, in particular the things that the commission cares about? Because there's a whole lot of other things that are going on, but for the commission, the part that they care about, it might be a good exercise when you guys get after that first round of Seth grant. So it's a long way of saying, Katie, let's figure out a meeting with Ballard.
So I have a follow-up insurance question. So Katie, since we have you up, the regional sub-area plans, I understand those are bigger, but those are for the whole, each regional growth center. The scope of those plans, are they comprehensive, meaning do they include, in addition to land use, do they include transportation, capital facilities, and how are you scoping those?
Yeah, so our regional centers plans are required under GMA, as part of our sort of their, sub-area plans. They'll be adopted into the comprehensive plan, after we finish them. So they list essentially out all of the different elements that you need to include. There's a checklist that you have to do that PRC puts out. So they are comprehensive, they are holistic plans. They cover land use, open space, transportation, all of the wonderful things. And so those are being led, by our sub-area planning team. And while they, transportation and the stations are a big part of it, but obviously there's a lot more that's going on there. So we've been coordinating with them in regards of like how we talk about, how we plan for the stations, how we make sure we're leveraging the additional transportation capacity those stations bring. But they aren't the same as stationary planning in that they are not centered on the stations, if that makes sense. Like these are already bustling urban centers. Whereas the stationary planning team is really looking more at places that might experience significant change because stations are coming. So those are much bigger, much more comprehensive sort of planning processes, where the stationary planning is going to be a little bit more focused than those.
All right, yeah, I understand that. It just sounds like the sub-area plans will be comprehensive and that they will deal with transportation. So both plans will deal with transportation access, just with different geographies, for example. Okay, I want to make sure everybody gets their questions in. Kate, I don't want to lose you online. Do you have any questions for Sarah and the team?
Not at this point. Thank you.
Okay. I'll just ask for kind of a show of hands. Does anyone else have a clarifying question? I have another one. So in terms of the near term, Sarah, when Eastlink finally crosses the lake, Seattle will gain another station. I always like to remind people that Eastlink does include a Seattle station.
SDC.
Is that ready from the city standpoint? Is that ready to go? I mean, is there any permitting, transitway agreement change or anything?
All of that's been long done.
That's what
I mean,
I figured.
the station is we've got little punch list closeout items that are associated with occupancy for the station. There's also, I can't speak on where exactly it is, but there's been work between the city and WashDOT on some of the improvements in the immediate pedestrian access improvements because of those on-ramps to I-90. that have been underway. Yeah, we're excited for that station to
So
open.
there is some city work, but nothing significant.
There's nothing significant
probably
that's
requires
happening.
construction.
No, there's nothing, oh yeah, nothing that's gonna require construction.
Any other questions? Okay, in that case, let's shift to kind of to Sarah's last slide. Like, are there things we'd like to hear more about down the road? Things we'd like to reiterate from the last quarterly briefing? Just any sort of recommendations we'd like to make to the city staff working on Sound Transit? So I'll just kind of open that up.
Oh, we're doing that now?
We're doing that now.
I think I'm excited to shift from policy to actually look at each one of these things and to look with you guys at what you're considering in each location. I think this is sort of to your point, but like, don't bring us a thing that's decided. Because I think that is a frustrating review, right? It's just you presenting what you're going to do, and then the city on our side can't really do it.
We want to be helpful.
Yeah, very important to see those options and to see what you're considering, and for us to be able to impart.
Yeah, and I'll just tag on to that. I completely agree with, we want to get reviews at points where they're still relevant. And I think what's a little confusing on BLE, maybe that's the wrong word, but we've already had an EIS process. We already had a lot of alternatives analysis. Now, and your slide there was really helpful on the SDIS. Here are the things that now the SDIS is looking at. But the fact of the matter is, everything's still open, right? I mean, because we don't have a rod yet. So even stuff we didn't concentrate on, maybe in that supplemental, are still open questions from the CEPA NEPA standpoint. So I think as you bring some of this stuff to us in future reviews, I don't know to what extent we're getting involved with the SDIS review. That's still a big question, but I think what would be really helpful is we're like, here's an issue where we'd still like your input. And I know that's probably not every single question that's going to come up on BLE, for example, but sort of thinking about that, like where can we add the most value to some of these questions that are going to be very front and center during the public review standpoint.
Well, this goes back to your terms matter to you, our terms matter to us, right? When we are reviewing something for concept, we want to be able to talk about concept and guide concept. And whether you are calling it whatever it is, this is still going to be a concept review. And so we need that to come to us at the appropriate time.
One thing that I think would be, that we've talked about, it's that it's the area where sort of the project wants. I mean, you mentioned the legislation that was passed vis-a-vis the tree and some of it's tree and landscape sort of, which would be at a project level. And I guess that applies to a couple other things, which, it seems we don't want to be like too late talking about these things, but it would be good to, those almost not policy, but their framework kind of level thinking. But it'd be great to understand, to get ahead on some of the ones where we're not just looking at a station, but it's still relevant for us to look at something a little bit more systemically. And I appreciate that opportunity to you, and I think that'll be a natural part of your quarterly work. But maybe in some cases, I don't know if it's actually almost a project basis one. And then I think, I don't know if this really, Brian's point, I don't want to, but something like, I'm not sure I understand that, and I'm sure the city has articulated this before, but a kind of policy vis-a-vis, guideway location and its impact on the surrounding properties and on the, I know this has been an issue with kind of case by case basis, and a project on a station basis, but there's, one particular area, which is as we get up to that potential terminal station in Interbay. But I just wonder if there's a way that we could have, I know that may not be on the same list of streamlined or but it has been streamlined in some way. And it'd be great to understand the city's position on that. Which is partly a policy position, you know, but also in its own way, it's not so different than having a project level tree management. Very different approach of the same scale.
One of the things that Valerie and Saranya have been talking about, and then Sarah and I talked about this, I think, last week. One of those project concept things might be coming to us sooner rather than later, and that being the bike system at below Pigeon Point. Because I think that's getting close to 30%.
Yeah.
And you saw it a while ago, but then there've been some changes, and I think that's part of, I think what you're asking about, that might be one of those type of projects that could come to us that is a implementation of a larger strategy in terms of what are the implications of that investment on that hillside. That we have to figure that out, but I think that might be the kind of project you're thinking about, right?
Yeah, and you know, in some cases, there may be their fait accompli. I mean, they're givens at this point, but at the same time, we just need to have a better understanding so we can make more meaningful comments.
What is sorry, this is a question I should have, what is the timing for the release of the SDX?
We'll share, I know you already shared it, we'll double team it and say that it's probably November timeframe.
So public, it'll be 45 days.
45 days.
Okay, so all we have to get.
Is it 6?
And in this perfect world, there would be this was in the original, this was in the supplemental. We can show you, commission, in terms of the urban design and environmental stuff that you care about. Start delta change and what you can, in perfect world, that would happen, but that might not be possible.
Yes. When we are in a review phase, whether that's the admin draft or the draft that we had previously or the draft that's coming up, it is an all hands on deck and like, oh man, we are trying to get through a lot of information. We have our next quarterly staff update in December, which right now, if the schedule holds, we will be in the throes of that DEIS phase. We are doing a lot of work preparing for that. And we've already done a lot of work knowing what some of these new stations are going to mean. And so I don't want to overpromise. Optimistically, we would be able to come to you and say, here's some of the places where the city is likely to make a lot of comments. I think that example of the station consolidation at Denny and South Lake Union, we are going to have to really rethink a lot of network issues around that Mercer Harrison corridor, how that E-line is interacting with the system. There's so many things that were going to happen at that South Lake Union station at 7th Harrison. There's going to be a lot of new thinking about where those connections are made if that moves forward. And we're going to want to comment on that in the DEIS. So that's the type of thing that I think would be very right for us to bring to you and get your thoughts on.
I think that's what I was getting at, that the city, needless to say, has a huge array of policy decisions to make here, right? About how we want to. And I'm not assuming you're going to run every single one of those by the design commission. You can't. Right. So then it's going to be sort of some strategic thinking on everybody's part, but to your point, what are the things you want to highlight for us at that December quarterly update, assuming we can do it, because you guys will be crazy busy then.
Oh, I'll be here. I'll be here for the quarterly update. I promise that, but I don't know that I'll be flanked by many.
I think that's what we're all trying to get at here is where can we really add value? And that's because that kind of review is very different from the PE review on the station, right? This is at the DEIS level, that's more of almost a policy review.
Yeah.
But also looking at urban design issues and land use issues and aesthetic issues and stuff that we typically weigh in on. So it's going to be kind of tricky figuring that out. That requires some Valerie, Michael.
Yeah, well, let's have some follow-up on that. I like Ray, what you said about like thinking about the framework level, what are the big bodies that are moving forward at the framework level that maybe aren't, that are gonna help shape what you later see, to Brian's point about, understanding the context in advance and having some ability to shape the outcome at the conceptual level. I've got a long list already now for December that is way more than we could ever reasonably get through in the meeting. So I look forward to follow-up conversation about how to winnow that down to something.
And I think part of that, Brian's made this point, well, they made it in June, let's not forget about the alignment in certain places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Kate, did you have any comments for sitting there in the city team?
Yes, thank you so much for the presentation. And I'm in awe of the layers of complication that this project entails, and appreciate particularly the imaging that you shared of the scale of permitting that you all have to attend to at the same moment, and also the image of the Venn diagram of relationship with the city, with station area and station context. And so from the art planning perspective, just a comment about this is kind of where the Venn diagram meets with the city of Seattle. Is hearing particularly about when the Seattle Office of Arts and Culture is going to get looped in for station context involvement, and then how that relates to Sound Transit's art plan. So that's granular, but something I just want to flag because there's a lot of opportunity for synergy there, particularly if those conversations happen early. And then I also just wanted to note that I'm looking forward to hearing in detail when the time comes about how the racial equity toolkit and community outreach conversations are informing decision-making or conversations around the stationary area alternatives. And looking forward to really hearing about the nitty-gritty of what's informing that, particularly if there's budgetary considerations informing those choices. That's it. Thanks.
Yeah, I think Kate's last point, that's really important. I mean, some of that can be done at a quarterly update level, but on the West Seattle PE reviews, for example, like we were always wanting, like, what have you been hearing from the community? What are the big issues? And that when we get to Ballard PE, we'll be really want to drill down on that. But from the city and side.
Yeah, and that's one of the tensions, just that we don't get out in front of to do that community planning in front of knowing where the stations are going to be.
Any other comments or recommendations for Sarah before we go switch to Jason?
Maybe reserve the right to go back to Sarah after this.
You're leaving, yeah.
We will reserve that right. Taking a donut and
That right,
Yeah.
right, that right.
You can't leave yet. And just so I don't forget, Jason and Justin, could you be sure to email me what you're gonna show?
Yeah.
Okay, so continue, are you in?
Thank you, Katie, for joining.
Thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
No problem. Feel free to follow up if you think of anything else.
Oh, I will.
All right, well, thank you for setting the stage with the enterprise discussion. And again, Justin Clark here with Jason Hampton to present on the Sound Transit update. And, we do appreciate Sarah giving us some space at these quarterly updates to share what's happening on the Sound Transit side in parallel with the city work and in collaboration. So we're trying to give you the most comprehensive update on what's happening. And I think the goal of the quarterly update from our perspective is, once we come for a design review later on, we're not starting from scratch and giving you a 45-minute update on, what's been happening at the board level and the community engagement pieces. We'll still give those updates at a briefer clip during those reviews, but this is really to set the stage so we don't get into that level of detail for those more detailed design reviews. So appreciate you having us here. Just the agenda of what we're going to dive through. Again, Sarah shared on the enterprise level initiative. That's an extension of the agency work plan effort that started back in 2024 to really dive into a lot of these cost optimization issues across the entire ST3 portfolio. So we'll give you an update on that piece and then how that influences both West Seattle and Ballard. So Jason will dive into West Seattle on a more detailed basis. Ballard Link, we're going to give you a short update on where that is on the schedule, but we'll give you a bigger update as you know, with the DIS coming up, we'll have more details to share there. So that's it over to Jason to talk work plan.
Sounds good. Good to be back. Thanks for having me. How many of you watched the System Expansion Committee meeting last week? I've seen a lot of hands. Okay, so that's good. So we wanted to bring some slides that were presented to the board last week and just kind of give you a view of what we're working on for West Seattle. Sarah talked a lot about Ballard, and I think it's notable to say that we're at a different place in Ballard, right? They're still in the SEPA NEPA process. They're still evaluating alternatives. West Seattle, differently than most of the other ST3 projects, has a project to be designed, identified by the board last year. We have a record of decision. So as we're approaching our cost saving work and looking for opportunities, we're really building off of the feedback that we've heard from the community, the coordination that we've had with the city, and the feedback that we've gotten on the PE reviews through our design process. So we're not necessarily avoiding things that, you know, could have big changes to that. We want to evaluate everything and leave no stone unturned, but we're trying to find an affordable project within kind of the rails, if you will, of what we've already done and not try to undo that. So with that being said, this is not my presentation, but I'm going to give it today. So it will be mine after this. The cost saving work plan that Justin referred to really looks at kind of two different elements of programmatic opportunities. So these are things that the agency can look at for all of our ST3 projects. Thinking about, you know, station standardization, things we can do as an agency to be more efficient and to be an owner of choice and attract more firms to work with us, thus driving down prices. And then a big part of it is project opportunities. So looking for opportunities on the project, in the case of West Seattle, as we have more information, to be able to drive down the costs and to look at doing things a little bit differently to find an affordable project. We're really here to talk about Ballard and West Seattle today. Just to note that, as I said at the start, Ballard is in kind of the conceptual engineering phase, and then we're in post-conceptual engineering and kind of in the PE phase. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like on the upcoming slides. So the cost saving process, I think when we were here, we've been to a couple quarterly briefings that we were here in November presenting on the Delaware Station, Longfellow Creek, and some of the guideway through Avalon. And that was shortly after we received a new type of cost estimate for the project that identified a gap between the affordable finance plan and the project. The board around that same time, I believe it was motion M 2024-59, asked us to implement a work plan to find a project that was affordable within the ST3. We started that process in earnest then with kind of in-house resources. And it was based on the FDIS and the ROD. And we've been moving through kind of a value engineering exercise. There's a lot of terms of art for this work. We call it the opportunity registry. You may have heard a few of these in the boardroom. But really to look at opportunities to bring that cost into an affordable realm. A lot of that work happened, as I mentioned, internally, and we were working to bring on a final designer or engineering design services to take those concepts and validate them and then develop cost estimates, but also to develop their own ideas for potential cost savings. And then we'd evaluate those and move some of those forward as well. All of that's been going on in the first part of this year. And we brought our final designer in-house in June. We had noted to proceed. We've made really good progress with them. A lot of the ideas that we had, they've been able to validate, and they're pushing those ideas forward, looking for other cost saving opportunities. So we're kind of in that validation phase. It's the second level from the bottom, if you will. And then moving toward the end of this year, And they're kind of on a limited term contract. We hope to have kind of a package with a bow, if you will, present to the board. And then should the board need to make decisions about configuration or the project moving forward, we hope to have some feedback from them later this year, early next year. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in the upcoming slides. So with project cost saving measures, we're really looking at 4 different levers, if you will. And we're calling them levers, and they range from, and on the left, you can see it's easier to implement for lever 1 and more challenging for lever 4. And lever 1, we'll have examples of most of these today, is really things that can be decided at the project level. So as you advance design, you're continually making decisions and making things more efficient and bringing costs down and refining things. So things like span optimization and foundation optimization, I'll have a slide on that, would fall under lever 1. Lever 2 are things that would require interdepartmental decisions. Sarah talked about 20 different departments at the city that her team is working with. We have a number of departments at Sound Transit. It's not just about building this. We need to make sure that our service delivery department can implement this service and that our asset transition office can manage these assets and things like that. So we're coordinating interdepartmentally, looking at these cost saving measures. Third lever are things that would be board and third-party decisions. So Sarah mentioned the no Avalon station. Obviously, that's a change to the board-approved ST3 plan. So that would be a lever 3 decision. Other things that would fall into that category are things that would potentially require approval from the city, bigger changes that might affect right of way or something like that. And then lever 4, it was mentioned earlier about Smithco, but looking at phasing. Every one of the projects has a minimum operable segment that's in EIS. For West Seattle, it's the Delridge MOS. And so, what would that mean? Would that bring the project into affordability? Ultimately, the goal is to deliver as much service, this high quality service, as was approved in ST3, but we're looking at everything in this term. So I'm going to talk about a few examples, but first, just a quick reminder of what we're trying to do out there. And Sarah talked about this being one of the biggest and most transformative programs in the history of the city. The West Seattle Link extension would add 4.1 miles of light rail service connecting SoDo to Delridge and Alaska Junction in West Seattle. The board approved alignment includes 4 new stations, and this would connect West Seattle with a regional light rail network. So eventually connecting West Seattle all the way up to Everett. It reduces travel times from Alaska Junction to Westlake by 50%. Currently, a bus trip would take about 30 minutes from Alaska Junction to Westlake. With the complete network, it would take 16 minutes. Of course, that improves frequency, reliability, and capacity. So at any time, that trip is going to be a consistent 16-minute trip because it's grade separated the entire way. It also, the comments from Katie and Sarah earlier, facilitates redevelopment near the stations. So new networks to get to those stations, but also potential equitable transit-oriented development, and then development around the station core. And of course, we'll never forget when the West Seattle Bridge was out. And it's a really good reminder that resiliency and redundancy is important in the transportation network. And so this would provide another opportunity, another way for people to get from West Seattle to Seattle downtown and beyond. And then one of the things that was part of the ST3 network plan was to consider future expansion to the south. So we have some great bus integration with this project, but the ultimate goal would be able to service communities south in the peninsula with light rail service that connects the regional network. Okay, so this is where things get hard, right? So about a year ago, we had a new bottoms-up cost estimate. It's more of a contracting style estimate. The type of estimate that you would do as you advance design compared to earlier using unit costs and parametric style estimates. At the time, we identified a project cost of about 6.7 to 7.1 billion with an affordable finance plan of 4.1 billion. Looking at that alignment before any cost saving opportunities, whether programmatic or project specific, we've since updated those numbers to 2025 using the inflation indices and we've updated the finance plan number with assumed revenues. And so we're looking at these numbers now. This has nothing to do with the scope of the project, just inflation updates. So we're looking at a gap still. But the good news is we have some really good opportunities to bring that cost down. That's what I want to talk about a little bit here.
We're not building it in 2025.
So these are $2025. The board is also presented this in year expenditure dollars. But this is typically how we would track project budgets before their baseline.
Per year.
Correct, yeah.
Did you update it every year?
They're updated every year, yeah. And the finance plan number will be updated as well because those numbers will have changes in inflation as well. So this slide is similar, but it's a breakdown of the project costs and 4 discrete buckets. So we have a right of way shaded in that aqua blue. In the yellow orange, we have indirects. The construction hard costs are in the dark blue at the bottom. And then we have contingency there. So we've taken the contingency, and we've pulled it out of all of the costs. And just to show what our contingency is, and it's similar to the OP30 standards that FTA requires for transit projects. So you can see that the construction costs have substantially risen in the finance plan assumptions. And then if you look at right-of-way costs, you can see it actually looks like it went down, but in fact, the right-of-way has gone up. As we all know, right-of-way and real estate costs are going up in the city. The reason that it looks lower now is because we've pulled out that contingency and added it to the gray area. So before the contingency was shown in those other categories. Again, all of the numbers here are shown in 2025 and the cost savings are not reflected. Next slide. So this is a pie chart that shows where those costs are. Starting with the top left, we show contingency. You'll see for all of the ST3 projects that are at about this level of design, we're carrying about 30% contingency. That's consistent with the FTA requirements. For West Seattle, I think it's important to point out that we have a hard cost, the construction cost. Guideway track is about 14% of the total cost, and the stations are about 16%. So there's a lot of money in the stations. Of course, there's a lot of money in the guideway and the track, and this includes the foundations as well. But as a percentage, with the 4 stations over 4.1 miles, the stations are a big driver of costs there. So that's an area where we're really focusing on cost savings right now.
I'm not saying the opposite, though, but it's only 16%.
So you can see that the hard costs, the construction costs, are only a small portion of that pie. And so 16% of the total cost of the project is stations. So we have more costs in stations than in guideway and trackway. And this was pulled from last week's system expansion presentation. And what we're not showing today is they also presented on Everett. So where Everett has a much longer guideway and fewer stations, their costs are primarily in the guideway and track elements and less so in the station. So as we look at opportunities to reduce costs, we look for where those big buckets are. And on Everett, it's the guideway. So they're looking at opportunities to potentially go upgrade through areas. And there's less money to be saved in stations. Next slide here. This is kind of a preview of where we're at for potential cost savings. And just to note, these are based on some of the initial concepts that we've had our final designer evaluating. We have some other ideas that they're evaluating, the team is evaluating that are not reflected here. So when we look at the 4 different levers, we show the potential cost reduction that we've already identified and validated here. So we show the total project cost that was shown on the earlier slide in $2025, the 7.1 to 7.9 at the top. Then we show that finance plan number with a pink bar that goes down the center of those bars. So when we look at lever 1, these are things that we can just do as a project team. We've identified a 5 to 6% reduction. These are cumulative as we go. With lever 2, and I have some examples of these again that I'll share, we have an 8 to 11% reduction. And then when we look at lever 3, and this would include not having an Avalon station, we see a reduction closer to 15 to 20%, or 13 to 17 is shown there. We show the MOS, which again is not our goal. ultimately want to build to Alaska Junction. But we're showing that that's within the finance plan at 3.3 to 3.4, again, not including the ideas that we're continuing.
So that's Soto and Hill Ridge.
Soto to Delridge, correct, yeah. So I want to go through a few examples of what leads to these numbers, and these are just illustrative. This is a really busy slide, and all of these slides are somewhat busy, but we're doing a lot of work, and we really need to show that work. So at the top left, you can see the WSLE-05 and 28. So we have an opportunity register where we're tracking all of these ideas. We've numbered them, and we're leaving them here. And this is just to note that there's a couple of different ideas that are combined on this slide. We highlight that this is a station optimization, and it's a level 1, right? So this would not necessarily require interdepartmental or third-party coordination, because it's really just taking the design, ensuring that we have a great passenger experience for everything we do through the station, and then reducing costs. What this shows here is, and you'll all remember from the PB review, that there was a lot of mezzanine to the station. So we had a lot of elevators and escalators and vertical conveyance to get people from the 1 line to the 3 line within the station. By doing a little bit more analysis and bringing on some new thoughts, we were able to kind of consolidate that mezzanine to the center of those station platforms. And we're able to provide concentrated access for people transferring between the train lines and accessing the station at the center. By consolidating that access in the mezzanine level, we would reduce the station platform or the station canopy by about 2/3, which substantially reduces the amount of foundation work you have to do as well. So you save above ground, you save below ground. We still have some foundation work that's necessary for anywhere you see the elevated structure over the lines, but this is substantially reduced the footprint there and the cost. And we show at the bottom right a potential rough order of magnitude. We are, as the next step, having our design team come up with detailed cost estimates, similar style cost estimates that we described before. And then we have an independent third party that's going to be validating these costs as well. Next slide. So similar to that, and again, we have all of the same descriptors at the top. This is a level 1 cost saving measure, and this is about aerial guideway and foundation optimization. And so one of the things that we've looked at is the opportunity to combine all of our elevated guideway into one contract package. And by realizing an economy of scale by doing so, we are able to look at an opportunity to do precast segmental. This would be setting up a casting yard offsite where they would cast all of the precast segments similar to what they did down between Angle Lake and the airport. When you can realize this scale, reduces cost. It reduces critical path work because you can cast these segments offsite and you don't have the same constraints. It improves quality and improves safety. One of the things that we've done by doing this is we've looked at the Delridge station layout. As you remember in the PE, it was a center platform. And that required us to kind of widen the tracks as we came in and out of the station, which had different implications. Widen the structure really for further distance. We've looked at building the guideway straight through the station, which helps us realize this economy of scale, but it also shifts the platforms to side platform. Thus, we don't have to widen the trackways as we come in and out of the station. So there's some implications for design there. Gives us a little bit more flexibility on the transitions in and out of the station. Also reduces costs and potential schedule risk. Another thing that this does is it reduces impacts on the right-of-way and properties below the guideway. If you're doing a cast in place or lifting girders into place from the ground, you need a lot more access to the ground and potential road closures and property effects. With this, there's a lot more flexibility in how you get those segments up there. You can lift them and you can move them up above the ground. So a lot of good opportunity there. And again, the costs are shown at the bottom right. So this is at Soto Station. This is a lever 2, so sometimes we certainly have to work with our operations department and consider passenger experience here. You'll recall that in order to build this, we showed a track detour, which we call a shoot fly in the EIS. And that's essentially building a new track, and it's shown on the right side there, to the east of the existing station and bringing the one line through those properties, between Lander and Fulgate, and then back to the existing track. And this gives us a little bit of a more flexibility in how we build the station, but maintains the one line during construction. So the design team has considered that assumption and the need to keep the one line running, but looked at a potential shoe fly that would be on the west side of the Soto station. So kind of building the new tracks that would be the permanent tracks for the 3 line, and then utilizing those during station construction. So we call it the west shoe fly. And by doing that, we're able to potentially reduce a large number of property acquisitions that would be necessary for West Seattle. It's worth noting that the Ballard extension is directly north of us, and they're continuing to evaluate the alternatives and the potential effects on those parcels. But we do see a big reduction in property effects for West Seattle, and Ballard's working to design and also minimize effects and property effects, as you know. So this is a big opportunity that's been validated. It'll be moved forward. Next slide. So here's another lever too. So this is a station optimization at Alaska Junction. So on the map on the right, the north arrows at the bottom left, it's pointing to the left. So you can see Alaska Street there. And then under most of that shading is 41st Avenue Southwest. So as you all recall from the PE, we had a tunnel station under 41st straddling Southwest Alaska Street. Directly to the south of it, we had a crossover to get the trains from one side to the other, and then a tail track where they could store a train or make that movement to come back and continue eastbound serving the passengers. We've looked at configuration where we can shift a crossover to the north of the station. We're looking at a modified crossover design. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we had a coordination with interdepartmental. A shorter crossover, it requires a little bit more maintenance and a little bit different speeds. And so we wanted to make sure that this was acceptable. It has been accepted by our service delivery department. And so by having that on the north side of the station, trains can switch tracks coming into the station, and then we no longer need those tail tracks. And what this does is it greatly reduces the amount of cut that we would need to do to build that crossover in the tail tracks south of Edmonds. So you can see there's no highlighted parcels or properties south of Edmonds, between Edmonds and Hudson. So we would reduce those property acquisitions. We would reduce that, nearly 600 foot of open cut that would happen as the grade was going steeper. So it would have been a really deep cut. So that, improves schedule, improves risk, and reduces cost, and still provides the same level of passenger experience to our riders. Notably, and acknowledging that we had some really great feedback in the PE review, and a couple of the things we talked about here were that vent shaft, which would have been south of Edmonds, and then the TPSS. We now need to find a location for the TPSS and the vent shaft within the head house area or within a different area. Not unusual for how we build our stations now, but just a note that that's something we'd be coming back with at 30% and acknowledging that we need to continue to collaborate on that, how that would look and change the field and look at the station. But good opportunity to reduce costs there. The next slide, and I'm going to come back, and you're probably going to ask me 10 questions I can answer, and 100 I can't, but I want to keep going for a moment. So this is the Eliminate Avalon station. And it's not something that we take lightly or we would want to do, is to eliminate a station, but we need to give the board all of the options that they have to help bring this project into affordability. As you all recall, we had a no Avalon station in the final EIS, and it included a portal that was just to the east of the West Hill Bridge connection to Fauntleroy around Andover Street. We've taken that cost, and that included an optimized alignment, tunnel alignment, to avoid those surface impacts that are shown with that orange line and the red axis. We've taken it a little bit further with the cost saving measures, and we've looked at shifting the portal further east to the east side of Avalon Way, where the life storage is. So there's a storage unit there that would have been impacted by the construction of this no Avalon alternative as it was. And the construction team prefers that tunnel portal location. It's a much better shape of site for tunneling. And it's at a grade where they can kind of naturally get into the hill. And then it reduces surface impacts. So we would reduce property impacts, surface construction, and we think that it can actually reduce cost over the alternative that was shown in the EIS, which is, thinking about the public engagement that we did, something the public felt pretty strongly about, that if we didn't build Avalon, we should look for opportunities to further reduce impacts and move the portal. And this is something that we were able to be responsive to and realize additional cost savings. The notes, and again, I'm not hitting every note here because there's a lot, but one of the things I want to point out under EDS phase 1 is, our work is now done here. This is looking at a shifted portal, and we validated that cost in the design of it. But we're going to continue to look for alignments between the Delridge station and the portal that could further reduce impacts. So thinking about the PE alignment that went over Longfellow Creek and, concerns that we've heard about displacement of the West Seattle Health Club, we're looking to see if there's an alignment between the station and the portal that would potentially reduce those impacts. And that's work that we would continue, but it hasn't been validated yet.
Or are these two stations if you get rid of?
I think it's about a mile and a half. The Avalon station was pretty close to Alaska Junction, probably just over a half-mile walk.
Also a huge.
Remember, there's about a 10-minute walk that was. So
That's the big thing.
Yeah.
So, yeah, of course. We're gonna keep going now. So this, I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because this is not our goal, but it's a tool that we have in the tool shed. And this is just showing the phased alignment. So an MLS would include a terminus station at Delridge. So it would be Stoddard to Delridge until Ballard open, and then Delridge would connect in with the existing system and continue up to UW and beyond for Lindbergh and Fort Everett. We showed on the lever 4 that this is within the affordable project, and this shows some additional detail on ridership. So the full build was 24 to 27,000. For this, we would have 17,000 daily riders, and it would provide that transit integration still for Community South and West Center and Burien. We'd have some updated bus connectivity into the station, but the good thing is with the PE design, we had some really great transit integration there. So when we think about the work that we've done in the community and really understanding, the racial equity toolkit focused communities, which is Delridge, and the connection to communities to the south, we'd still be able to provide that connection and a quality transfer there.
Sorry, on that, I imagine the city's pretty heavily engaged in this. Is this essentially saying you're busing to Delridge and then you're getting on a train and then it's a much different transit answer than a train to West Seattle in general.
It is. Yeah, and the city is very involved. That's why we're not flying our entire teams right now, because they're meeting to talk about, cost saving measures and to really kind of get into the details and understand, some of the things I've described here today, what the implications of that would be. I will note that with the Delridge MLS, it would eventually connect to the entire system. So it wouldn't be a transfer at Delridge and then the transfer, so it would be a transfer at Delridge and then kind of a seamless connection to the regional system. But it is true that it doesn't get to Alaska Junction, right?
I mean, is there the opposite version if you're talking about parallel tracks through Delridge with side things that could be built later? Right? You're saying you're going to streamline the track through Delridge and put
This would
outboard platforms. That sounds like it can be an infill or a, whatever the one is up by Northgate that came later. Is that?
You're saying
the
Delridge would
opposite?
be the infill, but you still go to the junction.
Yeah.
That doesn't get you the same level of cost savings as an alternative. Because the station build out is much smaller portion than building a tunnel station at the junction and building the tunnel.
Completely understand. This is just if I'm on a bus, I'm not getting off a bus to get on at Delridge to then go to downtown. Right? Like, I'm just gonna stay the next 10 minutes on that bus. There's no way I'm riding this.
There's also a lot of people that are not going downtown and they're continuing.
You're already on the bus.
If there's a bus, heck with that.
Well, that's why if the city's gonna say buses only go to Delridge, they don't go downtown, then that's a pretty strong statement from the city.
Or Metro.
And Metro.
King County Metro.
Yeah.
The city in
Yes,
general,
yes.
sorry, I'm using city
know,
as like the
I-
wider transit plan.
A couple things just to add on. The vast majority, and Jason, correct me if I'm wrong when I say, when I start off the sentence already, the vast majority. A lot of the access to the Delridge station is by bus transfer already. You know, the most of the users for the Delridge, even if we build out all the way to the junction.
Correct.
Most folks are coming up from further south in Delridge and accessing the station by transfer. So we've always known that this is going to be a heavily transfer-rich environment. Now, what does it mean if it's an interim terminus and now suddenly there's nothing at the junction? And are folks gonna, you know, if they're on the C line, they're gonna continue all the way downtown. If they're on the H line and they would have made that transfer anyway, or some other bus, they might still make that transfer, especially if they're not going downtown, if they're going all the way to the university, or if they're going all the way to Northgate, or making a transfer to the airport. We don't want to see this. I mean, to be absolutely clear, the city doesn't want to see an NOS. The city wants this system built out. The city wants the system eventually built out all the way through. So, you know, we are all the way to actually Renton as the study goes. I think that all ideas should be on the table. And so the idea of coming back and doing an infill station at Delridge, that's not going to get you the cost savings to bring it underneath the financial plan, but it would yield cost savings. So I would welcome ideas like that too.
So we probably have, because these are huge policy questions. So I would say let's defer other questions and comments. Let's let Jason get his presentation and then hopefully we would want some time to deliberate. So we break up at 12. So just.
Sounds good. So we're getting close. Strategic next steps for West Seattle. So as I mentioned, we have our final design, we call it phase 1, and really the primary goal is to validate and develop cost saving measures. There's also additional work, as was mentioned, you know, they're continuing to advance designs in some of the early works. So thinking about the Delridge Connector Trail that was mentioned before, that is advancing. And we'll have that as an opportunity to review before some of the other station work that's related to these cost saving measures. In order to continue advancing these cost saving measures and validating and advancing the design, we're going to need to ask our board to approve the phase 2 or an extension of the phase 1 for the design contract to keep them in-house and have them be able to continue to make progress on this. So that's something that we'd be expecting to go to the board on in the near future. And then just looking at the overall allocated budget for the project and how we can keep things moving while we're demonstrating that this project can fit within the affordable and the enterprise level funding for SC3 and the overall agency affordability. And then, you know, by keeping things moving, we're able to continue to maintain our schedule, or at least keep the best schedule we have been in light of some of these challenges. So that's probably more of a slide that was geared toward the board, but wanted to bring it here and give you a behind the scenes. The last slide here is something that you've seen before. And I really like this slide, even though it's really busy, but we've done a ton of engagement on this project. I have a lot of respect for the work that the city engagement team and our SDC engagement team has done to ensure that we're keeping all of these different streams moving forward and through the community with good feedback and having touch points along the way. So the environmental review with the draft EIS and the final EIS for West Seattle was really kind of the big lift between 2021 and 2024. You can see some touch points there when we published the draft and the board selected the project, and now we're in the design phase or design validation phase. But through all of this, we had our station planning engagement, and Katie was a big part of that, and Darren and Sloan, some people who aren't even with the team anymore. were a big part of that. And those efforts helped us understand what the community priorities were for the station areas and for the stations. And they've been woven into the designs that you see in the PE. I think we talked about it when we were here last about we've just gone into the community with some of these station updates, and we've gotten really good feedback on those, and those are informing the design as we continue to evolve the designs and the cost saving measures, and that continues through the next phase of the project. And beyond those two kind of spheres of engagement, we've continued to do engagement with property owners, business owners. We've had really great partnerships with the Department of Neighborhood and Community Liaisons to reach communities outside of the station areas, but those who will depend on the stations in the future. I'm doing in community, in language workshops with the Department of Neighborhoods, Community Liaisons. Has been a really good way for us to understand kind of the priorities at the stations, particularly the Delaware station, which is a transfer station. And that continues. Well, we're out in the community now talking about cost saving measures and what the potential implications would be. But once we have a little bit more design, if you will, with the configuration that we move forward with, we'll hit the ground running again and build on that engagement that we've done in the past. And looking forward to continuing to work with Eric. I know he's on board recently, and others at the city in that effort. So that's when I hand it over to Justin.
Yeah, so we'll just close out here with a short schedule update on Ballard, and then we'll open it up to questions during the discussion here. But West Seattle is firmly into that final design phase and working through the optimization efforts as well. But Ballard is still in the environmental phase, and so we are, as we shared before, looking at November publication of the DEIS. We'll have the public comment review cycle after that, and then jumping into 2026, we'll start developing the final EIS with the hope to publish that early in 2027. That's when the final design phase is intended to begin for Ballard after we get a project to be built decision from the board at that time. So in parallel to the environmental phase is the preliminary engineering work that has begun, and that's where the similar optimization, cost optimization effort is ongoing for Ballard as well. And maybe on this next slide, I'll just show that similar schedule of what's been happening on the Ballard extension. But we have the environmental review process on the top that in parallel, the preliminary engineering effort is ongoing. And again, that's where that cost optimization effort's happening for Ballard. I'll just note that, West Seattle and Everett Link, the optimization effort was presented to the System Expansion Committee last week. The rest of the SD3 projects will be presented over the next few months. So Ballard and Tacoma Dome Link are slated for October, November. And so that will kind of set the stage for our next quarterly update to share more details in the similar fashion that West Seattle was able to share today on some of those optimization alternatives that are helping the Ballard Link extension also get closer and closer to that finance. So yeah, with that, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you have.
And thank you. That's a lot of information. But it's fair to say these are huge questions for both Sound Transit and the city. And I think to just the point Justin just made, these are agency-wide questions for Sound Transit for the whole system. This isn't just West Seattle. This isn't just about West Seattle. It's not just about. This is about Everlink. It's about the BRT project, I presume. It's really about the whole SD3 program.
Reminder
so we
that
have to understand this in that context, because that's just the reality.
And that the board is a three county agency that has all of those priorities.
Absolutely. So with that, questions?
Having a hard time putting this together, so bear with me, I'm thinking a lot with y'all, but so much that we don't have time to talk about or dive into from the design and everything that's going on to the cost savings. And my point is maybe, I'm Eric, I'm sure you know about all the equity toolkit and all of that a lot more than me personally, but I'm personally interested in seeing maybe in these reviews we do together that for the design and also for the cost savings, like what are the measures? How are we measuring that? A little bit of like what we were talking about a little earlier. Are we being a little bit more traditional in the sense of we prefer like 20,000 rides a day, or are we kind of diving a little bit more deep into, are we going to serve like underserved communities or not? I think traditionally we tend to gravitate towards number because we want to be able to serve, more people, but I'm sure there's a lot more analysis there and you're engaging with the community on what are the important things there, or the communities that might be like 5,000, but they don't really have any other alternative to get to downtown, to get to a little bit more north. I think that's going to be an important portion of knowing those things are considered when these decisions are being made. I know the cost saving portion of it is very, very necessary, very important to the city and, taxpayer money, all of that. But being intentional and knowing that we're not being super traditional in terms of numbers and who are we serving, are we being really targeted towards that, are we giving people option, being equitable in terms of when it comes to transit. I don't know if that was any clear at all, and I know that's a very like big comment when it comes to like all of it, not just the cost saving, but I think that's an important portion to talk about maybe in the future.
Can I build off of that?
Sure.
Yes, all numbers are not the same, right? But also all development potential is not the same, right? Some neighborhoods will be able to expand and provide housing for groups that need housing much more than others, right? And so I kind of see like Delridge it's an important station for buses, but there's really not that much development potential right there. It activates another corridor or line, but I don't think that it's all the same. And I think having that kind of level of, like, are we serving, what type of communities are we serving with the different options, I think is really important. Does that help?
Oh, for sure.
I think that's a comment as well as a question, right? Which is fair, it's totally fair.
I can respond at a high level if it's helpful. Just, we are doing staff work to support our department leaders and our board members that are having these difficult conversations about scope reductions and trying to bring forward, the staff thinking about what are the trade-offs of some of these proposals. And so for the loss of the Avalon station, I think to your point, it's very easy to say, oh, that's the lowest ridership station. So, that one that doesn't matter as much as some of the others, but who are the 1,700 or the 1,900, I don't remember the exact number, and where are they coming from and how are we making sure that those folks are getting to another station? What are those mitigation measures? But with Avalon also looking at what are the displacement scenarios with Avalon and without Avalon? And one of the findings that we see from the FEIS is that without Avalon, you're eliminating a lot of the displacement that would have happened on that ridge and with transitional resources and with some of the community resources that we had heard loudly during engagement were very important to community to obtain. So we're trying to find that balanced look. To Delridge, we're also looking at, the TOD potential absolutely is lower there than at some other stations. The transfer environment, in fact, is really important, not so much because of just the number or volume of buses that are coming in, but because of where they're coming from. And that is one of our priority stations because that is offering an opportunity to connect to the regional system for the communities that are further south. So trying to balance all those things.
Can I?
Go for it.
So I guess for me, given the role that the commission plays in trying to advance urban design outcomes, neighborhood integrated. Is there obviously the operational and construction issues are enormous, the or independent, is there a framework that we have to have these outcomes? We have to have these design outcomes to make the station, to make this work for our communities. Is that part of the weeding out? Are there baseline things that are being used to weed out, we got to do this. This stuff is not negotiable. There are other negotiable things that we can live with when you are looking at the things that the commission cared about, successful integration of these investments that advancement of design and other outcomes that the city needs for this to be successful for their citizens. That seems to be an inherent question that are there things that are simply not negotiable in terms of those outcomes? And I mean, I don't know that you necessarily have the answer to that, but it just
I
seems to
don't
me that there are deliverables that have to occur regardless of some of the other.
The challenge that we have hit every time we've tried to articulate the must-haves.
Yeah.
Is that every station context is so different. The must-have that, balancing TOD and transit integration, for example, that's a great example where, the environment at Del Ridge is going to be so different than the environment at the junction. That it's hard to create one framework that is going to be meaningful for all of those stations. What we've done in the past and what we did with, when we go back to 2023, city council took action on, or 2022, council took action on a preferred alternative. We had drivers at each station that were context specific about what were the opportunities at this station. And then across the alternatives for that station, how did those different station alternatives fare against each other? And that's how we arrived at a decision. But when you have a SODO station in an industrial area, a Ballard station in what's going to be a future regional growth center, it's hard to create one set of must-haves. And that's not to say there aren't must-haves.
No, I know.
But yeah.
Is that, I feel like those kind of big options are valuable for us to see and to have comments on it. Is the plan to choose one and then come with that choice to us? Or is the plan to bring all of those options to us and get our feedback on the 4 things that are being considered and then make the choice? Which order are we going to do it in?
When you say the 4 things that are being considered.
Those things are being considered currently.
Yeah.
Do we get a chance to comment on those things before you make your decision? Or do you make your decision and then come and tell us that you made this decision? And then we comment on the final choice?
I think it's an iterative process, but ultimately we're reporting out what potential cost savings are to the board. And the board would give us direction from that.
And I would add those 4 things, correct me if I'm wrong, Jason, are examples.
Yes,
Of
those
dozens
thousands.
of things.
Right.
Understood.
Yeah.
And that was my concern was
Yeah.
if we are asked to comment on all of the options, that would be overwhelming. But I think there's a version where we comment on some of the key options and give you things to think of before you make that decision. That's in line with the concept based review that we've been talking about.
So we're in 1150. And I think there's more things to talk about. And we have a very light schedule on October 2nd. It's going to be probably this virtual meeting where we have commission business from 9 until 10. Can you come back then so we can continue this because we're running out of time today?
We can review calendars and
Because I don't want to truncate the conversation, but we kind of do have a hard stop at noon because we have another meeting at 12:30. But there's obviously a lot of things that people want to get to. So if that's something that you can do, I think it would be great.
we'll take a look.
That's good.
You're hoping to just continue the conversation or have some more information presented?
No, I think that there's a lot that the commission wants to comment on.
Yeah.
What they've seen.
Just no.
It's a lot.
Yeah, I don't think we need a new presentation.
No.
That was a lot of information
Yeah,
that we don't want to ask.
we're just running out.
a few more.
If you can share that with Michael.
I think it'd be great if we could get a copy of the presentation between now and then, so we can kind of read more of the detail that's in the slides. I think that.
That's a good foundational money question. have for you before we go. I think I know the answer to this question, but I want to ask it. When you say 4.1 billion in finance, that includes the pay-as-you-go and borrowing opportunity that the agency has, I assume. Because financing is associated with borrowing entirely, but it's not a borrowing.
It's not a bond, no.
Right.
I'm not the right person. to
You're not the
answer
finance guy, I understand,
yeah.
but the point is that that's the money that's available, period. There's no other money source.
Correct.
That's what I want.
Unless the city wants to do their.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to ask,
That is-
because I just can't help but notice that $3 billion is a large number. And that, you presented it to us and the only option, which can actually happen, if through financing calculations, is the last one, is when we use all the way through V4, which includes the station, eliminating, some stations. So it just, seems good time to ask the basic money question, whether there's any revenue side or any, if you were a corporation, we'd be asking, well, how are you increasing revenues? But, so I don't know if there's a comment there. I don't want to waste everyone's time with something so foundational, but it also gives us a kind of reality check, or, what is the real opportunity here?
I think, so a big part of this is the enterprise program, right? So the 4.2 is West Seattle. ST3 is much bigger than West Seattle.
Sure.
Other projects have similar cost pressures. Of course, in Seattle, cost pressures are the biggest because it's the most dense urban area that we're building in, right? But we also have a system to operate, right? And so the cost of operating that system has increased over time. As we all know, labor costs have gone up, material costs have gone up. So in that realm, it's a challenge as well. So they need to look at the entire agency financial picture. And so when you think about opportunities, right, we can't do it all, right? You're right. So what are they going to do? And so there's opportunities to pull some levers between different programs and projects. And that's really what the board is grappling with right now. And it's our job to really equip them with the information and the cost saving measures that we validated as we go. But as I mentioned, we're continuing to push things, but we can't get ahead of ourselves. We need to make sure those things work. And we need to roll them out and understand what that would mean to the system. So maybe there's an affordable project with West Seattle, but I think it depends more on what the other projects are as well.
I see. Yeah, thank you.
It is a big issue though. I mean,
Are they being considered together? Like, is it that we maybe don't go to Tacoma Dome, but we build West Seattle?
I would leave those types of decisions to the board.
Understood, but it's being considered together.
Everything's being considered together. That's the enterprise initiative, yes.
Okay.
And it's our expectation at the city, not speaking for Sound Transit at the city, and our board members, that discussion of new revenue would be part of the conversation next year when the board really gets into this, which then does change that the full pie that you have to get out of the scarcity mindset. And also that another lever that is available to the agency is time. And that's what was used in the realignment exercise back in 2021, is that when you push out the service delivery deadline or service delivery date, that gives you more time to raise the taxes, and that changes not always for the better, but changes the financing picture.
We're right here. And I'm sorry to stop the conversation, but we kind of need to. So our next meeting is on October 2nd, and it's from, again, only from 9 until 10. So if you can come back for that, we can just pick up where we left off. Questions and then comment.
Yeah, great.
And I think it's fair to say that a lot of the questions we have, Jason can't answer, Justin can't answer, Sarah can't answer. I mean, this is a regional board, and there are regional politics at play here. I mean, that's just reality. And there's regional consideration. There's people who really want Everett to happen. There's people who really want Tacoma to happen. So, I mean, that's layered over all of this. And Jason's right. I mean, these are ultimate decisions the board will make in conjunction with FTA and other local and regional partners. Right? I think it's fair for us to ask these questions, and we should. But that's just the reality of where we are.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I think with that, we're done. Stop the recording. Okay,